for this title. And he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something. And I'll tell you, honestly, I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
Yes, everyone, welcome to another edition of The Warm Down. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Thornley. Ben, you got a new book out. Let's talk about why you decided to write a book.
Believe it or not, I didn't actually decide to do it. I had no aspirations whatsoever. It never crossed my mind until the co-author Dan Poole, who's been a big United fan all his life, he'd seen me travelling backwards and forwards through Euston and decided to get in touch with me because he had a scrapbook.
Oh shit!
He had a scrapbook and he really got involved in following Man United when this class of '92 team started to take shape and was being talked about. And I was one of the few that was missing autograph-wise from his book. So I met with him. I signed whatever it was he wanted signing, and then about an hour later he rang me and he said, "Have you ever thought what an interesting story you've got? Would you consider, or have you ever considered writing a book?" And straight away I just said no, I haven't. It wasn't anything that was on my agenda at all. He came back to me 2 or 3 times with being very persuasive first and foremost, and it was his first shot as well. So we were both going into it quite blind, but he had an idea of how he wanted to approach it and what style he was going to write it in, and I had a word with my parents, with my girlfriend, and they said nothing ventured, nothing gained. So we set about it, and we were probably about 72 hours away from pulling the plug on it because we couldn't find anybody to publish it. There were either people that weren't interested, or there were people that decided that it was probably too closely linked to the Adrian Doherty book, which I can completely understand.
He's in there.
Yeah, which was a fabulous read that that Oliver Kay did, and indeed I contributed to that as well. And just like I said, with about 72 hours, we gave ourselves 2 weeks, and with about 3 days to go before we were going to say forget it, Pitch Publishing came forward and said, we'll take a chance on it, and we set about doing the thing.
I'm not shocked that anyone wanted to. I mean, I'm not ready yet, obviously myself. I'm going to be ordering a copy this week, and actually for you guys that want to get a copy, we'll throw the link in the description as well. So definitely go and check it out, because this team, much like the Busby Babes before it, this team has captured the imagination of everybody, hasn't it? For all of the different stories. I mean, there's 20 stories in this team, isn't there? From David Beckham coming from London as this Cockney wide boy that comes in and goes on as the career he has, to Rafi Burke's story, to your own story. And Ryan Giggs, he did all right, didn't he? So there's so many individual stories in all of this, isn't there? That I think that every single one of you can tell a story, and knowing how big United is, I'm surprised that anyone even thought twice about wanting to publish it.
Well, I think it's the simple fact that some of the names that you just mentioned there are obviously very stellar, and anybody that comes or that name that comes up, they immediately want to link to him. I'm not that name, I'm not that person. I think that the fact that I've enlisted the help of some of my class of '92 teammates to take part in the book has maybe turned 1 or 2 heads, and it was Pitch Publishing that came forward and decided that they were going to do it. But I think that with that team, every single one of those lads, as you so rightly mentioned, Stephen, they brought something different, both onto the pitch and off the pitch as well. And the fact that we all got on so well helped us when we took to the and we had a work ethic. We had Eric Harrison in charge. We had Sir Alex Ferguson obviously at the helm that was overseeing all of it and keeping a close eye on us. And we had to do things like clean the dressing rooms and wash the manager's car, and be subject to a little bit of abuse by the second year apprentices as they were then, of which Raphael Burt was one. But it all helped to build character, and we got on really, really well, and those lads that went on to have the careers that they did, your Bexes, your Gazzies, Giggsy, Nicky Butt, Scholesy, they were terrific characters off the field, but they had an immense work ethic, and when you've got skill to boot, and Sir Alex Ferguson in charge. It's a hell of a concoction, and it was no surprise to me or to anybody else that they went on and had the careers that they did, because they were fantastic lads and fantastic players, and they were always willing to learn and listen. Do
you think there's more players in that team that could have emulated what those that did get the opportunities did? I mean, yourself is the obvious one, and as I said to you earlier, this is my old man's programme from that actual Class of 92 final, which I've got another one in here somewhere, but this is the one that I keep in there, that I keep it in a plastic wallet. Like, this is the one that is my old man's. I didn't go to this game, my dad did. I don't think he went to the first leg, being in London, but there was a lot of talk of yourself being one of the players, and Rafi as well, as being one of the players that we never really got to see in the first team for Manchester United for whatever reasons. Is there much regret from your side on that because of the injury that happened?
I think that is fundamentally the reason why I never got to play more in Manchester United's first team. And you never know either, even if you did get given the chance, how you would handle it. I mean, those lads handled it brilliantly, and I think again that comes from the grounding that they got when they started at 16. Whatever, when I say abuse, it's all in good jest, but it does help to bring your character. It helps to give you that opportunity whereby if you don't make it at Man United, you're still man enough to go and make it elsewhere.
United's record actually with players not making it at United but having careers elsewhere is unparalleled, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean,
this day.
Yeah, you think of the players that left Man United and argued, well, I mean, they were more successful because they left at such an early age. So Keith Gillespie, for example, Robbie Savage, who I've recently been speaking to, Robbie went to Crewe, and he'd gone from Man United to Crewe, which is no disrespect to Crewe, but it's a huge gulf. But because he worked hard and because he had that instilled in him, he went from Crewe to Leicester, and we all know what a career he did and what a great career he's having at the moment in the media. So there are players that went away and left Man United and thrived. I was probably one of those as well, because I never got the opportunity to play in the first team, albeit I could and should have had a better career than I actually had. You mentioned Raphael Burke. I'm not quite sure, because he was certainly, when I arrived at the club, he was one of the most talented footballers for his age that the club had, and whether it was something that inside him that didn't enable him to fulfill his potential, I don't know. You'll have to speak to him, but again, a great lad, lovely lad to speak to, very talented footballer that probably himself would admit that he should have made a better career for himself because of the skill levels that he had. I
did actually speak to Rafi at the Class of 92 versus Salford game at Barton Stadium. I think you played in that.
I did, yeah. I was there.
I did speak to him briefly. I think he's coaching now. Is he in Bournemouth somewhere?
Bristol, I think.
Bristol.
Yeah, because he's originally from that side, and the last I heard, he that's where he was, and he was doing. I think he was coaching and doing stuff in the community there as well. So fair play to him. He's kept himself in the game at the a club that's close to him and where he grew up. So yeah, he seems to be doing well.
Talk about Eric Harrison, because I think this is one of the guys, a bit like Jimmy Murphy under Sir Matt Busby, that goes mega under the radar because of how bright the names of Sir Alex Ferguson and some of the lads that graduated from the Class of 92 and stuff are. Like, how good was Eric Harrison and how influential was he in some of the careers that we've seen?
Massively. I think if you speak to any one of those lads that we've just mentioned, they would hold Eric Harrison with the utmost of respect and regard. He didn't take any nonsense. He didn't treat anybody any differently. Everybody was the same. I mean, obviously at the time, some of those lads didn't have the superstar status that they've now got and worked hard to achieve, it has to be said. So everybody was on an even keel. We all did the same running. We all had jobs to do in the dressing room. And there were times when you thought that you were going to get a right old rollicking because of the way you played. But Eric would see things, even if you were having a bad game, if you worked hard and you tried to cover up for the fact that you were lacking in skill for that particular match, and things that weren't coming off for you. That was how I used to base my game. If I didn't get a lot of crosses in, or I didn't get shots on goal, or I didn't score, as long as I was working hard, then you would not hear his wrath. But similarly, and I quote one of these in the book, we were playing a game on the cliff against Chester, and for whatever reason, that we didn't have a lot of players fit, and myself and Nicky Butt filled in as makeshift centre forwards. Him being a central midfielder, me being a winger. Never played there before in our lives.
Do you know what? He actually scored a lot of goals at youth level, didn't he?
He did really well, and he was terrific to play with. As a central midfielder, I played with him when I was growing up for Greater Manchester County, and then obviously when I got to United, because I had a bit of pace, they moved me onto the wing, but you knew what Butty was doing. He would look up, he'd pass me the ball, and he'd go straight in. And I used to get rollickings from him if I used to mess about on the ball too much instead of getting it in, because he'd made these runs, and he was a fabulous player to play with. But anyway, we were playing centre forward. And this is the epitome of what Eric Harrison was like. I've just told you, you're expecting a rollicking. Well, we come in and we're 5-0 up, and I'd scored 2, but he'd scored a first half hat-trick. 2, I think, of his 3 goals I'd set up for him.
Doing all right then, yeah. Cruising.
And we got in at half time, and Eric Harrison, always his first statement was, "Is everybody okay?" He'd leave everybody just to get settled in the seats, and he'd say, "Is everybody okay?" And he'd say, "Right, you 2 up front." And when he came into the dressing room at the Cliff, the 9, 10 and 11 were right in his eye line, going from round the dressing room, and they were right in his eye line, and me and Butty were playing 9 and 10. And he went, "You 2 up front," and we both sort of looked up like, you know, we've been sort of high-fiving each other and what have you. "You 2 up front, what's going on?" He said, "The lights are on, but there's nobody in." I mean, what he sort of turned, and he went, "Don't you effing look at each other, just look at me." And that was Eric for you. The moment that you perhaps thought that you might get carried away, or he just made sure that he brought you back down to earth. But I mean, he was terrifically fair, and if you gave your all, he overlooked the fact that some of the lads weren't as skillful as others. I mean, even Gaz will tell you, if you ever spoke to him, that he thought of himself as way down the pecking order in terms of ability, but what he did have was a tremendous work ethic to go and work at the things that he knew he was exceptionally good at, and you know, he turned out to be one of Man United's greatest ever defenders, no question about it.
No doubt about that.
And we did all that under Eric's guidance, and obviously with Sir Alex looking on from even further up. But Eric Harrison, we will always hold with the utmost of regard.
How much interaction did Sir Alex have in that team? Because we know he's very hands-on with all aspects of the club, wasn't he?
Yeah, do you know what? He actually, most of the time, he let Eric get on with it. He knew that he had a sort of a talented side, a talented group of youngsters that were all coming through at the same time, and he held Eric with the same regard as we did, and he knew that he would get on and he would deal with the lads however they needed dealing with, and he would come down every now and again. I think the one time that I do remember him interjecting was when we'd let ourselves down in the final of the Youth Cup the second year,
93.
Yeah, in 93 against Leeds. And don't get me wrong, I know we didn't play well, but Leeds were a very good outfit. They were like men before the time, if you like, and they beat us soundly in both games. And I think he was
Scholes captain for that.
No, Gary would have, or Chris were captain. I can't remember which one actually.
That was Scholes' year, wasn't it? Because he didn't really play in this one.
That was Scott. He didn't play in the first year, no. But Scholes, and I know that he scored our only goal in that final. He scored a penalty, and he was our most outstanding player. And from the first year, without question, our most improved player. From Scholes being 16-17 to 17-18, he was just brilliant, and obviously it just built from there. But we were soundly beaten, and Sir Alex came down, and he had a bit of a go, because I think it was more out of frustration than anything else, that he expected the same team to go on and retain it, which obviously a Man United side hasn't done since the 50s, yeah. Since the Busby Babes. And so I think that was a little bit of frustration in with his anger as well. And Eric didn't really say anything. I mean, we were really expecting something from Eric, and I think even he knew that over the two games, they were the stronger and the better side, and deserved to win it, and they did deserve to win it. There's no question. I was on a radio show a few months ago for BBC Radio Leeds with Noel Whelan, and he I was very complimentary, and he was the same back as well. But they definitely deserve to win, and that's the only time really I can ever remember in 2 years the manager being disappointed with us. For the rest of the time, Eric got on with it, and it was always maybe just a bit of a pat on the back as you're walking around the cliff, because obviously at that time very few of us were involved regularly with the first team.
So talk us through, and I'm sure you're doing it a lot at the moment, and I'm sure it's probably quite painful to talk about, but talk us about how the injury came about and what the actual diagnosis of it was, because I know it was a knee injury, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But the injury was leading up to me possibly playing in the FA Cup semi-final against Oldham in '94. I know that the manager had question marks over whether Giggsy was going to be fit enough, and he made sure.
I almost fell down the tunnel when you scored in that. We was right on the edge of the tunnel at the old Wembley, wasn't it? There's like a 30-metre drop. We was on the very end seat, and when we scored, someone knocked us, and I nearly fell down the old, because no handrail or anything.
No, nothing. No, it was Sparky in the last minute that took it to a replay.
So he was supposedly on the cards for playing
in that, but because he knew, obviously because of my age, and he knew what a sapping pitch Wembley was. It takes a lot out your legs, and he thought, and I hadn't played for 10 days, and he thought it better that I go out and get a little bit of match practice. Which I didn't mind, because it goes back to, and you'll read it in the book as well, that Jimmy Ryan, the reserve team manager at the time, he asked me after about an hour, maybe 65 minutes, how I was feeling, and did I want to come off.
How many times you replayed that conversation in your head?
I think if there's one question that I would ever change my mind to, it would have been that, obviously.
My days.
And I said no, because I was thinking about it the Sunday. I was thinking about it beforehand, but once I'd got my kit on and I was out there and I was playing well, and I'd scored a goal and whatever else.
Yeah, invincible.
I wasn't thinking about coming off. I was an 18-year-old kid. I just wanted to play. I wasn't looking past the the nose on the front of my face. And hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And it was obviously a decision that I do regret making, but I probably didn't at the time. And such is life, that you then 5 or 10 minutes later you're hit with a nasty tackle. And
it was a nasty tackle as well, wasn't it? I've seen the tackle.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it would have been easier to take. I'm not suggesting how much easier, but it would have been easier to take if I'd have been a little bit like sort of Paul Lake. You've been sort of unlucky, and other people. Terry Cook, an old teammate of mine, I was on the pitch when he just sort of twisted in the turf and his cruciate snapped. And I know that things like that can happen, but this was something that I felt was beyond of what the laws of the game required.
He took him to court as well, didn't he?
Yeah. It was a high tackle. I only did that. It wasn't my decision. Sir Alex was actually in the stands at the time, and he grabbed my dad. Who was my mum and dad were both in the stands watching, as they very often were, and they knew because they heard the sound, and a lot of people thought it was my shin pad snapping, but Gary Walsh, who was in our goal sort of 70 yards away, he heard it, and it wasn't anything to do with my shin pad. It was higher up than that, where I was caught, and the damage was quite extensive. Obviously, both my cruciates were gone. I'd had a tear of my medial ligament and my meniscus, and a partial tear in the back of my hamstring as well, which would have been sort of 3 or 4 months of a job to repair by itself. But he opened me up that much to make sure that everything was done. And what Jonathan Noble, my surgeon, said was that if it was probably one of the top 3 knee injuries that he's ever seen, or when I say top 3, I mean worst. And if you can sort of put a book on its spine and just leave the pages just to fall open, and that's exactly what my knee was. He said it actually made his job easier because there was nothing left intact.
He just had to repair everything.
Yeah, he just had to he just had to basically start from scratch.
So it's not one of those like, say, Gazarad, where you go, oh, if he'd have had it now, it'd have just been 6 months out and fine. It was, no matter when you have that injury, you're screwed. It's going to be a long recovery. It
would have been a long recovery. I'd like to have. I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anybody, but I would like to think that with the evolution of technology and things like hydrotherapy and whatever else that they have introduced. I mean, people are learning new techniques all the time for injury repair.
Stem cells and all sorts of stuff.
Stem cells and everything, yeah. That I would have obviously preferred the injury to have happened in today's game, where there may have been more of a chance of me recouping what I once had.
I'll say something about doctors in Barcelona, but I'll refrain.
but we'll never know that. We'll never know. So,
do you think that influenced your kid to be a physio?
I don't think so. No, I think he just sort of he fell into that with the help of Gary Neville first of all. When United switched to Carrington, they needed somebody that was qualified to basically be a lifeguard, and my brother at the time was working in the local recreation centres, and the only person that was qualified to do it was Rob Swire, who was the physio, and he couldn't have been two places at once. So Gary suggested getting Rod in, and when he went in, they then suggested sending him on a massage course. Which is exactly what they did, and then from there he started at United full time as a masseur, which he's still doing, and along the way, when Becks became England captain under Sven-Göran Eriksson, I think it was the Chelsea physio that ironically Jose Mourinho decided he wanted back full time at Chelsea, who was also working with England. It created a masseur I should say. It created an opening. So Beck said, we've got somebody at Man United, let's give him a go. And he was there up until about 2015 when United decided that they wanted their medical staff in full time as well. So yeah, he's still at Man United. He's still enjoying it. Yeah, he's still there. He's still enjoying it.
I saw Jimmy Ryan there Saturday as well. Actually. Yeah, he's watching. Obviously, Neil Ryan's obviously now in charge of the 18s, so Jimmy's there. So I bent his head off and probably bored the piss out of him for 20 minutes on Saturday watching the game. But so that was the structure at the time, wasn't it? You had Sir Alex, you had Jimmy Ryan covering the reserves from about 91 onwards, something like that, to about 2000, and then Eric in charge of the academy and the apprentices at the time. Let's talk about some of your teammates. Your recovery took over a year, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I did come back playing again. The injury happened in the April, and I think I played my first game in the November of the same year.
That's fast.
Which it was fast, and probably, to be honest with you, probably a little bit too fast. I think the excitement and in all fairness, there was not really much else that I could have done other than play a game. But I just wasn't ready to play. Simple as that. I wasn't ready to play. I wasn't ready physically. I wasn't ready mentally. So I would imagine that it was getting on for the next season when I started to rekindle some of the things that I'd lost, during my spell with my injury, but never to the extent where those fine margins that you need to be at the top and playing at the elite level. I was just falling half a yard to a yard short of that, and that's all you need in the Premier League. That's all that needs to happen, and you're just not quite the same player. And I said to you earlier, I wouldn't have known whether I would have been able to continue that from being the player that I was in when I first arrived in 92, 93, whatever. I don't know whether I would have done. What I do know is that I certainly would have been given the same opportunity that all those lads had, and it's how I would have taken it.
Are you conscious at the time as well when you're coming back that you're not quite at the level you was at before? And are you thinking, I just need to get more sharp, I just got to work harder in the gym, or are you thinking, I'm not getting this back?
No, I had worked as hard as I possibly could have done. The only problem for me was that in the interim time when the injury happened and I was hobbling and I was on crutches, I was in plaster, then through something that I'd never encountered before, I'd started to put on a little bit of weight. And it was I couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? I mean, you have to eat, but it was just the fact that, and it was it was so noticeable that from all of a sudden I was like Sav, I was like Nicky, but I was like Bex. I was not skinny, but there was nothing of me. And then all of a sudden I'm looking in the mirror and I'm thinking, right, first and foremost I've got to shift this, and that took a lot longer than I anticipated it would, and in that time I'm getting down and I'm still not playing, and then you have the issues. You're not depression as such, but you do fall into that trap where you think maybe this isn't going to happen for me. But even when I had got myself back playing and I went on loan to Stockport and I went on loan to Huddersfield, I probably realised that certainly when I went to Huddersfield and they were in the Championship, that was probably my level. Having actually played a couple of first team games after my knee injury at Man United, I think I quickly learned, and so did the manager, that I was never going to be a regular in that first team. And by this time, Giggsy was well established anyway. Bex was in there, Gaz was in there, Nicky was in there, Scholes was in there, Keith Gillespie had played and scored a couple of times. And I just felt as though there was something lacking that was always going to stop me from playing at that elite level. And no disrespect to anywhere else that I went, but I would say that
Man United,
that playing in the Championship where we went well for a good spell, Huddersfield, and should have at least made the playoffs in that first year. That was probably always going to be my level.
I think this is the thing when you look in, I'm not going to name them, but it was some players we was talking about earlier. This key development age now, between 18 and 20, you've got to be playing games, and you've probably got to be playing as close to first team as possible, haven't you? Or you just fall off.
Absolutely.
Even without the worst injuries people have ever seen. Yeah. I think you can just fall off with not getting tested as much. Like, we've got a real gem coming through at the moment with Mason Greenwood. If he's just left to play 23s and 18s for the next 3 years, he will end up in League One, League Two. He's not going to end up as the superstar he could be.
I agree. I agree, and he's a really he's a shining example, because he's a super player. I've watched him numerous times this season. But I've always said from day one, and I know that it's easy to say it when you've done it, but whatever club that you're at, you need to have made your debut by the time you're 18. You have to have made your debut. I just think that fundamentally, and you've just alluded to it there, if you feel as though you get into, or if you are becoming to sort of 20, 21, and you haven't made your debut and you're playing in the reserves and you've not had a chance to get yourself out on loan, then you do start to stagnate. And this is no disrespect at all to especially under 21s, which is now under 23s football, but the idea of you becoming a professional footballer is so that you can be the best that you can be, and playing regularly in the Football League, whether that be the Premier League or whether that be in the Conference. And again, I don't want to use the Conference and being disrespectful to that, because look where Salford City are at the moment, and they continue in the same vein, and they could be in the Football League in a record amount of time.
I don't think there's much difference between Championship and Conference except fitness levels. I think most of the touches the same. I think the pitches are worse, but I think it's just a fitness and speed thing, and I think a fit, quick player could play anywhere from Conference to Championship.
You're probably right.
And I think the difference is the upper echelon of the Championship to middle range of the Premier League. You're talking like you now need a considerable amount of skill, and then obviously the top level of the Premier League, you need fitness, timing, skill. You need everything. Yeah. I think that's the difference. But I think you can go a long way from Conference to Championship being the fittest and being relatively quick. I think you'll go a long way with work rate. Like, I see someone like Joe Riley, just use Joe Riley as an example. I think he could go anywhere from Conference level to Championship level, and just because I think he's a really honest player that you're going to get a bit of graft out of.
He is, and he was when I used to watch him regularly as the cat. In fact, I think it was him that scored the goal when I was there down at Spurs. That
won the league.
Yeah,
he might have done actually. Yeah.
I think it was him. He certainly scored a great goal. I can't remember if it was him that got the winner, but yeah, I was always so taken aback with how fit he was, and the fact that he got up and down, and he got his debut under, was it Louis van Gaal that gave him his debut?
Man, yeah, Louis was giving debuts out like sweets, wasn't
he? He was, yeah, he was. But yeah, my old club, Huddersfield, I mean, they had a torrid time of it where they dropped. All right, they didn't drop into the Conference, but they went right down into League Two as it is now. And look where they are. And similarly, you look at teams like Bradford City, who spent a lot of time in the Premier League, and now they're in the bottom league. So it can change very, very quickly. But to be at that elite level, you do need all the attributes that you've just listed there. You need skill, you need timing, you need an incredible amount of fitness, awareness. It's just playing at that sort of a level is even more difficult now than perhaps it was back in the 90s when I started.
What would you say that someone like me as a fan that's never played anywhere near that level, I've played Sunday League at best, so what is the difference that you find as a player? Is it time on the ball? Is that the main thing, do you think? Space?
Well, you say that, but all the best players that I've ever seen, like Scholes, like Zinedine Zidane, like Xavi and Iniesta.
But is that the difference then?
Definitely, yeah, definitely, because they have something up here that allows them to get into the positions where they basically know where the ball's going to be or where it's the best for them to be able to receive it. And it also helps that you've got teammates that are that clued in that they want to give you the ball and they know where you're going to be. And I think that once you are at that level, I mean, Scholes is, I've been very, very fortunate to play with some incredible players. My hero, Brian Robson, I mean, Giggsy I grew up playing with, most decorated player in the Premier League. And Scholes, for me, because he didn't have the pace and he didn't have all the attributes that you would associate with somebody who is an unbelievable player. Most of them have got pace and I mean, he had plenty of skill, but you talk about players that can go past your Ronaldos, your Messis that go past people. Scholes was that clever that he didn't need to use his pace for that. He got into the positions and he scored terrific goals, and he was technically the most gifted player I've ever had the privilege of playing with.
What always reminds me of Scholes is that letting the ball run across his body, always. And he'd do a tiny little feint towards the ball, which I think always dragged the defender, and then he'd let it run past him and he'd collect it, and his first touch was always somewhere into space, and it was always a different direction to where the ball had come from. And you just think, he's bought himself days. He could have texted and walked around the pitch, couldn't he? I'm sure he probably has at some point messing around.
Honestly, he is incredible. And when you think about, he scored some wonderful goals.
He's still playing. He's still playing Saturday League at the moment for Chaddy, isn't he?
I still play with him every now and again when Man United are playing in these games around Europe. You Bayern Munich for the foundation and stuff like that. And he is brilliant to play with, but you think about the goals, the calibre of goals that he scored. I mean, when was the last time we actually saw anybody score direct from a ball that was played out from a corner on the volley? I mean, he did it against Bradford, he did it against Aston Villa, the one that smashed down off the bar.
How do they always look better when they smash off a crossbar?
And that one did, because it dropped so high out the sky as well. Technically, just absolutely flawless he was. I'm
going to ask you about Beckham in a sec, but that Scholesy edge of the box lurk, how did an opposition know that was coming? Because everyone in the crowd knew that was coming.
Everybody in the crowd, but I told you, he just had this knack, Scholesy, of being in. It wasn't luck. He knew exactly where he needed to be, and that's why he scored so many goals as well. And when you think that he's coming from a midfield role, he'd long since moved from being a centre forward, where he made his debut at Port Vale for United, and he'd moved back, but he's still, and not just there, but I mean, where would England have been if they'd have had both him and maybe Michael Carrick as well playing on a regular basis?
Either of them, both criminally underrated by England.
Yeah.
David Beckham's another one that makes no sense as a footballer, really, because I think he works really well in a partnership with Gary Neville, and I think both of them benefited from having each other massively. All Beckham used to do, I say all he used to do, but if I'm going to completely simplify Beckham, he'd do that little touch on the outside of his foot, he'd get his head up and he'd bang a cross in. How's no one getting tight to him? But that was what he did for his entire career, and his career's a joke, isn't it? From going from United and winning everything, to going to Real Madrid, to going to America and doing what Pele couldn't do and make soccer popular in America, to coming back and playing for Paris and AC Milan. Like, if you'd have said to 17-year-old Becks, sitting in the changing room at the Cliff, you're going to do that with your career, I don't know what it was like. Would he have gone, oh I know, or would he have been like, doubt it?
You just wouldn't have even envisaged that was on the cards. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he's played for top sort of 4 or 5 clubs in Europe and won, and gone over, like you said, and gone over to America.
100 caps for England and all.
Yeah, just incredible. And when you think about some of the adversity that he went through after the '98 World Cup, for him to be able to have the resilience to go on and make people forget about all that. He had an incredible work ethic. He had a brilliant set-piece delivery. He wore his heart on his sleeve, both when he played for club and country. We wouldn't have got to the 2002 World Cup if it wasn't for that free kick he scored at Old
You knew that was
Trafford.
going in as well, didn't you?
Absolutely.
He's missed 6 or 7 that day, and he lines up and you go, is it going in?
Yeah, it's going in. It's going in. And he must have covered about 15 miles that day as well. It was just incredible, the amount of running that he did in that game, and deservedly so. He scored that wonderful free kick to get England there. But what the things that you don't see are, like you said, how the positions, a little bit like Scholes, that he manages to wheedle himself in so that he has got that, because he knew himself that when it came to actually doing what Giggsy could do, or what I could do, or what Keith Gillespie could do, playing it in the position that he's in, he isn't gonna square a fullback up and go in or out and go past him with pace. And don't get me wrong, he was a very, very strong runner, a brilliant cross-country runner when he was younger and at school, but he wasn't a sprinter, and that mainly due to his physique as well. And he just looked, he glanced, he knew where people were going to be, and he could hit a ball around somebody, didn't have to go that close to him, you know what I mean? And by the time anybody had come to engage him, the ball had gone, and invariably gone into a position in the box where whoever was in there, Yorkie, Coley, Teddy, Ollie Gunner, any of those, they just knew how it was coming. And his dead ball specialist, or his delivery from free kicks and an open play with his right foot, would just, he didn't need to use his left, and he could use his left, don't get me wrong, but I always remember him as a kid thinking, I wish, when I say a kid, I mean when we used to go to Old Trafford to the Cliff in the holidays, and Bex used to come up from London and we used to play
14,
matches.
15.
That's right, when we were 14, 15. And I used to say, and don't get me wrong, I was quite happy with the way I was performing with the teams that I was playing in, but I used to say to myself, do you know what, I'd love to be able to kick the ball like that. And he just did, from a really early age. He had a technique that was flawless with regards striking a ball with his right foot. It just looked brilliant, do you know what I mean? And that all culminated and came together with that goal he scored against Wimbledon in the first game of the season back in, was it 95 or 96?
It was the 95, 96, 97, 95, 96.
It was
one of those.
I know, it was mid-90s anyway. I remember
96, 97 I think.
I remember listening to it in the car because I was on my way home, and they just said, the first thing I said to myself was, it really doesn't surprise me, because I've always loved the way that he's been able to strike a ball. And then when I saw it on Match of the Day in the evening,
I listened to it in the car as well. Actually, my dad was working Saturday afternoon. He was working somewhere, and I was sat in the car listening to the match while he was there. And then I'm like, Beckham scored from the halfway line, and I think he was like, shut up, has he? And then we see it later that day, and you're like, fantastic. Jesus. For me, it was the best player in the world in '99, and I can't believe he didn't win the Ballon d'Or. He came second, and I think United's vote probably got spread out amongst York, Keane, Scholes, Giggs, Stam. But for me, the mark of a great player is the impact they can have in the biggest games, and the bigger the game, the greater the player, if they can have a consistent impact in them. And if you look at all the key games of 1999, the final, you remember Ollie scoring, you remember Sheringham scoring. Well, Beckham put both balls in. Yeah. You look at the semi-final, you go, oh, Roy Keane's performance. Well, that header that he scored, Beckham put the ball in. And the other goal that Cole scored, Beckham put the ball in. The Inter Milan games, Beckham puts both of those balls in for York to score. You remember the semi-final against Arsenal, Ryan Giggs' goal. David Beckham's goal in the first half, if Giggs doesn't score that one, is the one everyone's talking about. In every single, the game to win the league in the last game,
Spurs,
he puts that first goal in. Like, Beckham was involved in every single key moment in that, but I think that people just was like, well, there's too many heroes in a team, and I think he was underrated because of that.
Who did win it?
Rivaldo, who didn't get out of the group with Barcelona.
Yeah, it is criminal when don't get me wrong, I'm not underestimating how brilliant Rivaldo was. Even Scholes says that he thinks he's the best player that he's ever seen. But when you get a team like Man United did that year when they played, it must have been 60 odd games, was it? It is criminal that
I think that was
a
case.
Man United player, and why not Becks? I mean, he was terrific. That, as they all were. But
I think from the consistency point of view, I think Keane went up and down like that. I think Keane kind of peaked out 2000, 2001. I thought he was unplayable then, but I think 99 he was up and down. I think Scholes was a little bit up and down. Giggs I think he was injured for quite a large part. That's why Blomqvist played so much.
That's right.
And why he was on the bench actually in the semi-final. He come on fresh because he'd been in and out of the team.
Yeah.
I think consistency wise, Beckham played probably the most out of all of those. I mean, I can go check it and find out, but I think consistency wise he was there. I think first game of the season Leicester either scored or set something up. Like for the entire season we won 3 trophies and he was key, and in all of the biggest games you can remember, like when we started the comeback, I think Liverpool around Christmas, there's a ball goes in for I think Solskjaer back post, it's a Beckham ball. Like every single thing that happened that season went through Beckham. I think he's criminally underrated, and he could have stayed at United for another 10 years and not seen a drop off in performance. He didn't rely on fitness and pace really, did he? He was the most technical player ever.
Yeah, he didn't rely on pace, but don't get me wrong, he was a fit lad.
Oh yeah, he did cover some ground.
He could run. Yeah, he could run. Yeah, he was a very, very good runner. But no, he didn't rely on pace. But his execution from set pieces and even from open play on that right hand side, if you gave him, even 2 seconds on the ball and didn't close him down, he would have that ball exactly where somebody wanted it. And he's a fabulous player. And what everybody forgets as well, brilliant lad. Absolutely brilliant lad.
Isn't it mad how much of a superstar he is?
Yeah, incredible. And I don't see him like that. But
give us his number.
He is.
I know you've got it on you.
Only just recently, believe it or not. Yeah, only just recently. But I shouldn't worry about it. He never answers anyway. I don't ring him, and
I can't imagine how much his phone blows up every day when he turns it on in the morning.
I don't want to add to that. Trust me, I don't want to add to that. It's only a necessity.
Right, Ben, why should we buy this book?
It's a good question. I think that, I mean, first and foremost, for me, it's a different way of an autobiography being written, I suppose. The way that it starts with the tackle, so it doesn't start, it's not in chronological order, but the way that Dan has written it, and the way that he introduces different people that we've spoken to along the way, not just people from the class of 92, but it's people that played in the actual game when I did my knee, and also people that I made my debut with. So you get the likes of Paul Parker, Brian McClare, Dion Dublin, and some of those overlap, and some of those actually did play in the game that I did my knee. Obviously they weren't involved in the class of 92, so it's speaking to different people from a different generation, but all that have played with me before and after my injury. And that was the angle that he wanted to, basically what sort of a player did those players who everybody recognises and whose hopefully opinion they respect would I have been. And yeah, obviously there are other bits in it as well. It's not just the tackle and talking about the class of 92. It's like any other autobiography, and that my family are involved, and there's a few other little scenarios that people I'm sure will raise their eyebrows at, but have a bit of a laugh at nonetheless. I'm hoping that they feel I'm hoping that they feel as though it's been honestly written. I've been very open, very candid about some of my darker times as well, but also the fact that I show no bitterness or resentment towards either the lads that have gone on and had a brilliant career, which would never ever happen. I'd be the first one in a long line to shake their hand of what they've all achieved, and the guy that tackled me, although I do hold him responsible. And it was that tackle that changed the trajectory of me and my career. There's no two ways about it. But I'm hoping that, like I said, that what does come shining through at the end is that people think that I'm a decent character in the fact that I've been able to live with this and not hold any bitterness. Because people have said to me, how have you? How have you gone on that somebody took a career away from you at Man United?
You've got to, haven't you? Well,
you have to move on. You have to move on. You otherwise it just eats you up from the inside. And I didn't want to be a person that was consumed by anger and jealousy and bitterness. I wanted people to see that even when you do suffer terrific setbacks like I had, you are still able and eligible to go on and apply yourself, and having the right people around you to be able to go and still have a career in the game, no matter whether it was the one that you wanted, or indeed the one that you were destined for.
And let's not forget, you still had a full career as a professional footballer. It might not have been winning the Champions League with Manchester United, but you have still been lucky enough to have a full career as a pro footballer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just because I left Man United, it didn't all come to a complete halt. But there are things, and I discussed them in the book, that there are things that I could quite easily have disciplined myself to do better later on in my career that maybe would have given me a little bit of longevity. I decided not to do that for whatever reason or another. But like I said, I go into the detail and explain that. But I'm not an unhappy person at all. I'm thoroughly enjoying doing what I'm doing now back at the club and working with MUTV. I can owe a lot of that to the teammates that I had back then, the friends that I've got, my family that I've got, and the girl that I'm with now and that have been for 10 years. So yeah, I'm feeling good. Right,
there you go. So go and get his book. The link is in the description. I'm going to order my own copy this week, and I've got that one to read, and I've got Soccernomics. It's piling up the amount of books that I've got to read as well. But thanks for joining us, Ben.
Cheers, Stephen.
And I wish you all the luck with the book. You lot go and fucking buy it, and we'll see you in the next one. Laters.
Thanks very much.